Good. Welcome, everybody. The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the April 8th, 2024 meeting of the City of Asheville Noise Advisory Board. My name is Reb Hayslip, Chairperson of the NAB. Committee members and staff are participating virtually today. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the Noise Advisory Board page. For those of you out there today joining us, welcome. I will now introduce board members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Board members, as I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Jessica Thomason.
Present.
Rick Freeman.
Present.
Jeff Santiago.
Present.
David Ledger. Okay. And of course, we are joined today by Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley, our council liaison. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
Also with us today are several staff members, Todd Justice and Ashley Stanley. So with that, I think we can turn to the agenda and ask for approval or look for approval of the minutes. Everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? Anybody make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll call the roll. Jessica Thomason.
Yay.
Rick Freeman.
Yay.
Jeff Santiago.
Yay.
Myself, yay. Antoinette, do you vote? I'm not. Are you a voting member? No. Okay. Did I get everybody? Is everybody here? Okay. Minutes are approved. We'll have a noise administrator check-in. Todd, if you have anything you'd like to add today. Everybody have a chance to review the new statistics, data, information from Todd and company.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really new. Pretty standard complaints. We have a persistent complaint that originates from the VA property that we're working through. I'm afraid that we've done pretty much what we can within the ordinance to alleviate his concerns, but I'm continuing to engage with him. But everything else has been pretty smooth for the last month.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like the numbers were pretty consistent as they have been for the past few reports. Okay. We'll turn to old business then on the agenda. And the first one really is the priority list. You'll all recall that at the retreat, I had asked each of you to think about what our priorities should be for 2024. And Jeff, thank you for getting your information to us. I thought that was good stuff. So thank you for that. But it's now particularly important because we have been informed that the noise ordinance will be before the Environment and Public Safety Committee. I think it's May the 28th, which is the fourth Tuesday in the month of May. And I think so it puts additional emphasis on our need to define what we would like to present to the council, what we feel like our priorities are. And I suppose Jessica and Rick, having done it before, some state of the union with respect to noise, both anecdotally as well as data-wise. Todd, I think you're on the agenda separately from the chair and vice chair of the committee. So I guess that you would be presenting the data as it compares to years past and what you see in that data. And then I think we would probably, as the board, present our priorities for 2024 and assessment of the effectiveness as we see it. So that's something I think we really ought to focus our attention on. For those of you will know, none of you did get a chance to see Jeff's inclusion of his priorities, but I thought it was a good one, and that was really to focus more on multifamily. While we all know it's incredibly difficult to do anything within the multifamily housing units with respect to noise, where most, if not, I think around 50% of our complaints come from. Jeff had the idea of trying to include someone from the multifamily community on the board in either a designated capacity, which is not currently the case, or as a member of one of the three communities who would be represented on the board. Jessica, that's why I asked you what the designations are, because I'm not sure what slots are filled on the board. But Jeff, I thought that was a really good idea. And I'd like to hear your opinions if you think this is the venue where we should begin to set the agenda for the Environment and Public Safety Committee, or if you would like to take that offline and develop some thoughts and circulate that internally and to prepare what we think is the best presentation. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I think that, I think it is definitely something worth bringing up in terms of, looking at the agenda. I know that board composition is C, but I think, this is conversations that Rick and I had been having prior to our positions of chair and vice chair. And I do like the idea of having somebody from multifamily, because I think that's a perspective that as one of the highest numbers would be great to have. And I know we're going to talk about that more, but I definitely think that should be something in terms of priority and just things that we can do. And actually, part of it for us, right, is figuring out as this, going into the, this being one of the newer boards that the city has had, and us sort of figuring out how we fit into the role of the city and seeing how things move so slowly. Really looking at priorities in regards to like what we can actually make an impact on. Because I think that's the one thing that we've continually struggled with, right? So for me, I think like vehicle noise, I just feel like because we already have time invested in that, obviously is one between now, especially with us at least having a connection to Lieutenant McClanahan now, that hopefully we can, continuing down that road, and especially with the signage, as much as whatever we need to do with having support, from Antoinette and Ben Woody to figure out like how we can actually make that some sort of a reality. And also because it's one of those things that we see consistently with businesses downtown and residents downtown, is just something that it hasn't gotten any better even in the off season. So it seems to me like that's something that's just low hanging fruit for a better way of putting it in terms of making a priority. But I think that, and if we can go to them with a board composition, also curious to hear what everybody else thinks, because I'm sure there's other priorities too that we need to be focusing on, but those just two are that stand out to me.
No, I agree with you. We've had some good continuity on vehicular noise, and we can come back to that as an agenda item. The things that I wrote down that we seemed to agree on at the retreat were to reprise the survey. There was the one question that came out from the city that asked about the effectiveness of the ordinance. I think it was number 14 or 15 questions. I don't know that I didn't see a response or response numbers to that. I think we all agreed on vehicular noise. We all agreed on board composition. There was some agreement around residential sound level limits, and we've all discussed construction noise, and both the really sort of the hours that are allowed for construction noise. But those seems to be the ones that we've all agreed upon in conversations in the past. Any thoughts on those?
Well, I'm all for working on board composition, because we're really having problems with, we never had a construction person. We go in and out on restaurants. And if I look back at the discussions, especially related to anything with decibels, it's not really a technical discussion. It's not, what's the definition of a decibel and how does this decibel match that? It's a question of impact on human beings, which is more of a public health, you know, I wish we had an expert on the board that could do all the darn research that could be brought to us so we could really understand what somebody feels when there's 65 dBA or dBc rattling around inside their house for 4 hours a night. You know, I find that we have opinions, but you know, it's none of us probably have the time nor the medical or science background to really say, you know, this is definitely a stressor, and here are articles that support it, or it's not a stressor, and here are articles that support it. So I'd actually be lobbying, just in clear openness, I'd be lobbying for replacing the audio engineer slot with like a public health safety, whatever kind of role that is, you know, because, you know, we've never questioned the measurement techniques. We don't think there's anything wrong with the meters and how they collect data. They're very flexible. They could, you know, we did 30 minutes of data collection during the DBC investigations, and that, you know, was illuminating. So we're not really debating whether we're taking fair measurements. We're debating what the result of those measurements are and whether the citizens that feel those measurements have a legitimate complaint and therefore we're too high, or they don't have a legitimate complaint and therefore the decibels are fine the way they are. So that would be a good one. And as you know, we never had a construction person. So I think we knew that construction was a noise source and one that could be abused, but it feels to me like enforcement knows exactly what to do in that case. And nobody is coming asking for construction to start at 5 a.m. and run till 10 p.m. You know, we're not getting any of those complaints. So, and the last thing, if we tackle multifamily, we did for maybe a week back in the days, we wrote up the canned version of the ordinance. We did find, I'm going to say it was Raleigh, that actually had some decibels inside an apartment limits, you know, because but that's the only one we found. So if we could get a multifamily management person or otherwise, we probably should come back and revisit whether it's just a nuisance. You know, are we getting thousands of complaints because it's just the nature of a bunch of people living all really close to each other and being annoyed? Or, you know, is there a better way to qualify, you know, whether the complaint's legit? And, you know, are there examples in other ordinances to handle that? So I'll stop.
Both good points, really. I think we could reach out. It would be easy to create a space for multifamily because they could be one of the community representatives. And there's multifamily places located around the city. So that would be an easy one. I think that there would be currency with the Environment and Public Safety Committee for Public Health because it is on their banner. I mean, if you go and read what their charge is, the second one is public health in a number of different domains. But I think that they might gravitate to the idea that in the absence of a construction industry person on the board ever, or no, there was one briefly, I think, that might be a reasonable substitution. So I mean, I think that's something. Go ahead, Antoinette, please.
Just procedurally speaking, a change of the board would actually probably first come through the Boards and Commissions Committee. And I am on that committee. And so that is something that I don't know if Todd or Ben can provide direction on how to get it to me. And that goes through the clerk's office, the city clerk's office. So any changes to the composition of a committee would come through boards and commissions. It certainly wouldn't hurt to bring it up in what is it now? Environment and public safety.
It is, yes.
You know, the most direct route for the change in the board composition would be through boards and commissions.
You think that's the first step, is the board's commission, and then raise it with public safety? Or would it go from the boards and commission committee straight to council?
Yes, the
Okay.
latter.
Okay.
So there's two
First thing
parts
you
to
were
this bill.
discussing, as it related to cars and stuff, that's definitely public safety. What is it called? Public safety.
Environment and public safety. It took me a long time to get it to.
Sorry, yeah. When I joined council, it was public safety. So to me, it's always public safety. It couldn't hurt to discuss it in both.
Okay.
But as far as the composition goes, I do have a question though. I'm wondering how difficult it would be to get someone with that particular level of expertise.
Public health, you mean?
Yeah.
It just so happens that there's an individual in Kenilworth who is a public health professional who is not extremely, but very involved in the effort to quieten the mission front. And she's very publicly minded. And I mentioned it to her very briefly. She didn't commit to anything, but she could be a candidate.
I feel like Todd had something to say.
Todd, go ahead. Sorry.
Actually, Rick was trying to get in there before me. I'll give him a chance if he wants to talk.
Yeah, all I was going to do is point out that the noise ordinance itself defines the members of the noise ordinance board. So I don't know how often that is the case. So I'm wide open to which is the chicken and which is the egg, but we would have to get approval to revise the ordinance and distribute a new one.
And then that recommendation would come from the boards and commissions committee.
Got it.
And the attorneys would get involved. So that's a clerk's office, a Ben, maybe a Brad, probably Miss Ashley, and it could come through the committee on which I sit.
Okay.
That was going to be my point, that the ordinance does delineate what each position is supposed to be filled from. So you'd have to go change the language of the ordinance before you could see any real change there.
So it might be a two-step process. Jessica?
I was just going to say that I think it would be great to have somebody like public health related. And I have some audiologists that I've worked with in town that have done like hearing tests and things like that. I also have a neurologist that consulted for us during the pandemic that may be able to speak to, you know, what noise, the effect noise has on the nervous system, for instance. Who may be, you know, just other potential people. I will say that I don't think we should replace the pro audio engineer position with that. I think it would be in addition to that, because I think that it's just good to have somebody who has like that level of knowledge if something comes up in the future, for instance, that for instance Carmelo had. I think it was helpful, and just in terms of the fact of looking at the board makeup being also ways, you know, people to help when situations arise, so that there's that level of expertise. But I definitely think it would be great if we had somebody in the realm of health. And then in terms of just so you know, in terms of what it states in the noise ordinance, like Rick was talking about, it's in terms of residential, it's like north, west, east, and central, I think is what it's designated as, I'm pretty sure, for people on the board. So it's kind of interesting when we're talking about like somebody from multifamily. It's like somebody from multifamily could designate one of those slots. So I don't know, just moving forward, how we want to look at that, if it's just designated as, if it's just like one person from one of those neighborhoods also has to have that classification, right? So just food for thought.
Jessica, I agree with you about the acoustics engineering. We have now 2 candidates who have raised their hands, both in the field of urban noise. One of the individuals was involved in the original noise ordinance, and another is a consultant with a company here in town whose specialty is noise, really kind of related to military installations around the world and the effect of noise on urban environments around them. So and then there's another individual who has recently moved to Asheville, who was named to me, who came out of a noise science background. So we have a pretty flush hand when it comes to selecting that individual. So I would agree. I think we have an opportunity to select somebody for the board who could make a real impact in the field of noise acoustics. Antoinette, I do have a question. What is your feeling about the composition as the liaison? Do you think that it makes sense for us to try and sort of recalibrate the composition of the board to more effectively push forward ideas about the ordinance?
So my attorney brain instantly says, I don't have any feelings about it. But if you're asking me, do I think it's a plausible endeavor? I think so.
Okay.
I was texting Ben right now, relaying just so I don't forget what we're discussing. And it'll definitely need to involve the city attorney's office. I suspect it will be easier to add to the board than to remove a seat. And then you could take it from there.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. Good advice. Any other thoughts on board composition before we move on?
I just want to say that's interesting to think about it that way, in terms of it's easier to add than to subtract, right? So say, for instance, if we were like, oh, how important actually do we want to take off the restaurant position? Or for instance, the construction one, which I do find it interesting that as far as the staff report went, for today, that there were more construction than seems like issues than we've had. Like there was 2 citations and 2 warnings in the realm of construction, which I kind of feel like hasn't, we haven't seen a whole lot of that as of late. So, but yeah, because then that way, as even if we're not trying to get those ones removed, for instance, with like that, the recommendation, then at least if we don't get them filled, we don't get them filled, because here we are, we've been sitting without a construction person. So if we get them, great. But seems like if we want to make some sort of change, it probably just makes more sense to say we want to add these additional people to the board.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, that makes sense as well. I just want to touch point on the acoustics expert too. I do agree. Part of our objective here is, mitigation. So part of that is, residents just having dialogue with each other to help solve those problems, but also someone who could help maybe figure out in terms of businesses and things like that, where true mitigation can help solve a problem with how a business runs, how they soundproof, and even with construction. I feel like, development and construction, we miss a lot of that idea of how are they approaching this construction in terms of noise mitigation and how it affects public health. So,
yeah, thank you. Ashley, I have one question for you. Are the 3 city resident positions filled?
I am not 100% sure. I would have to try to look at the roster, but I'm not sure because I don't deal with the applications.
Reb, I'll tell you.
I know I'm one of the neighborhood.
Yeah. So Jeff, Rick, and you are residential.
On West Side.
Actually, Dave Ledger is classified under industrial construction.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
So you are a resident. There's nobody in the restaurant position. I am performing arts. There's nobody in the acoustic pro related industry. Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you. How difficult would it be for a standing member to switch to a different position? For example, I could go to construction. I'm a professional architect. I mean, I'm in the field of construction. I'm not a built, or on the other hand, Jeff, you could go to music venue. If we could open a neighborhood slot, we could go ahead and start searching for a multifamily representative. Yes, Antoinette.
So that's a clerk office consideration. I would think that it wouldn't be too difficult. But again, those changes would need to come through boards and commission. And we'd have to take a vote. You need to say, is the recommendation of the board chair that, and then fill in the blank.
Okay.
But again, I did reach out to Ben, and he's awaiting a discussion individually about the changes that you just proposed.
Okay.
He'll connect you, he said, with legal, and in turn, it'll lead to the clerk's office, and then eventually to boards and commission committee.
Great. Perfect.
So there's a specific lesson in there, Reb, that I think Jessica and I learned, but maybe forgot to tell you. We need to run our ideas through city staff and have their support before we end up in front of a commission. Otherwise, we go left and they say, I like right. And having had the city staff on my side when it was against the developer, it's very handy to have city staff agree with you when you're trying to convince the council of moving in a particular direction. So this background work, thank you, Antoinette, for opening the doors, with setting up time to talk to Ben, and, you know, heading into the city hall to talk to Brad Branham and whatever it is. Those are things that can make the subsequent official things go smooth.
Okay. Also duly noted here, Rick. Thank you.
And one more thought, and this is just a very personal observation on my behalf. It is easier for a citizen to go into the city attorney and say, we need to go this way, than it is sometimes for a city staff person to take that position. So we as board members, we have that right to go argue, right? And win or lose, depending on how the case goes.
Okay, good. Anything else on composition? I'm going to scramble the agenda a little bit. Antoinette, since you're here, and I know you said you might have to slip out, I'll juggle the council report to the top if there's anything you'd like to add for council report.
I don't have anything in particular. I didn't know I was going to need to give.
No, you don't. It's just, I wanted to give you the opportunity.
We're, as always, during this time of year, we're in the midst of a budget season. So this is always the time that I encourage people, if there's anything in particular you are looking for, to reach out to the city manager's office or council members, because now is the time for funding. That's actually probably more a can thing than for you all as individuals, but we're definitely in the midst of the budget season. and encourage all of your neighbors to fill out the affordable housing survey. That's also out there too. How's that, Reb?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Back to the old business. The vehicular noise effort has been moving along pretty well. The letter that we drafted is in the hands of Lieutenant McClanahan, who was on leave week prior, and I think maybe training this week, so his schedule was a little busy. And he's going to read and review that letter. So that's been placed, and we're waiting to hear back what his opinion on that letter is. We had a little bit of a setback on our signage push. It turns out that sandwich signs are illegal by ordinance in the signage ordinance. So we can't put out our sandwich signs. We need to come up with the new sign technology. And Jessica, we might have to circle back to you with your banner experience. I know that I remember from the last conversation, that was a difficult thing to do, to try and organize the hanging of banners. But it may be where we are.
Yeah, have we completely ruled out the signage on existing signs?
Well, the city streets engineer, and correct me if I've got that wrong, but the person in charge of signs said, we're not putting new signs on old signs. Now, we haven't argued that, but the position was, and it's a reasonable position, I thought, we don't want to distract people from the main message of any sort of street level sign.
Mm-hmm.
But the initial response was just no. Yes, Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to add or expand on that, we had a conversation from department to department, and they said basically what Reb explained there was that they were not willing to do that. So if we were to somehow push them to do that, support us in this area, it would have to come from a decision maker in the city manager's office.
Okay.
So we would have to appeal to them and get their input and support. And the sandwich boards are illegal. What we call snipe signs, the little plastic stick in the grass in your yard signs are illegal, which basically just leaves us, I think, maybe with the banners on the utility poles downtown, the holiday banners, so to speak, and trying to put something up in that format. But I don't know exactly who I need to go talk to about that. I need some help there. But I'm willing to carry that forward if we decide to do that.
So I have one thought for you. It is possible, it has happened, to add a sign below the sign that was already there. We worked with the transportation department in my neighborhood to add a neighborhood watch sign below a T intersection sign. And so as people entered our neighborhood, that they would see that we were a neighborhood watch. And there was another sign just down the hill from it that we were able to get transportation to say, not an entrance to the mall, because we have a problem. People turn in by Cookout and they miss the immediate left turn that goes in the back way of the mall, and they drive to our dead end and then turn around people's driveways and all that kind of stuff. Those may not attract attention we want, but we could, if we knew roughly where we wanted them, we could do a walking thing and see how many signs there are and whether there would be, whether we thought it would be effective. So at least, unless there's different ordinance for the city streets downtown than there are where I live, there wasn't a problem adding a sign below so that the original sign stayed totally visible and a second sign told a second story. So, that might be a way around the no.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the contact I had, Ken Putnam, has retired. So I don't know if anybody left in the transportation department would actually admit that we did that in my neighborhood.
Jessica?
I was just going to say, when Rick and I went in front of Environment and Safety Committee last year, we had a significant amount of support from Deborah Campbell and the other folks on that committee for the signage component. So that may be something that we want to bring up in that meeting, is to follow up on that. The other thing is, I just went and looked in my email from when I've done banners in the past, and that permit came from John Philman because it was considered a special event. And so he's the one that gave a permit for us to pull the banners up around town, just FYI. So, and I know John really well. I've worked with him for years doing Goombay and Beer City and other events. So,
Jessica, you suggesting that during the presentation to Environment and Public Safety, we raise the question of whether or not we can employ signs on signs?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think at least let's have a conversation about it, because I think so. I think, based on what Rick said and his past experience with being able to get past something like that. And, because we've also, the other reason I think that is because we've had these conversations, these for a while, right? In terms of that. And I think it just sort of flip flops and goes back and forth between like budget and what is available to us to do and what's not. And just with hearing what Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley is telling us about, where the support's coming from, and Todd too, with the from the Office of City Manager, it seems like we do have support from Deborah and Ben in terms of this initiative. So if it's maybe that's if it makes sense to bring it up and say, hey, this was brought up last year. This is one of our areas of focus of dealing with vehicular noise, where we feel like we can actually have an impact, but here's where we're stuck. So if we can get some support in regards to being able to get this signage up, in addition to what we're trying to do with Lieutenant McClanahan of again, because I think if he's able to mention it to the officers, it's a hand in hand thing, right? It's like, we're not just trying to say, let's just put signs up and see if they work. We're like, let's put signs up and let's have, Lieutenant McClanahan do a whole thing to all the downtown officers that, in addition to what you're doing, please be conscious of the, vehicular noise that's becoming an issue. And then they also see those signs around. It's just they're reinforcing each other.
Agreed.
So I think if we can present that to Environment and Safety Committee, it may help us get through some of the red tape that we keep hitting.
Okay. Anything else on vehicular noise? All right. We've really covered our agenda today. Is there any new business? Okay. Ashley, do we have any callers today?
We do not.
We do not. Well, there being no further business before this board, anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? All right, second.
Second.
All in favor, show of hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Ashley. I'll circle back to everybody with my notes
Thank
of
you.
this meeting.